birds and clouds and rocks and stuff and small town western people.
Walking through the shit of human feces.
Welcome to Kyle and Dave versus the Machine video edition. This Friday on the podcast, we're going to be talking about McCabe and Mrs Miller, this kind of like anti-Western that director Robert Altman decided to be his follow-up to MASH the year before. Dave, what are your immediate thoughts on McCabe and or Mrs Miller?
Oh yeah, your ampersand. Yeah, I think when I was experiencing it and when I turned it off, I was very ill-content. I had a malaise.
It's very Shakespearean of you, Dave.
I don't want to say I didn't enjoy it. I did appreciate it, but it wasn't fun to watch. So I didn't leave my theater saying, oh yeah, that was a good old fashioned Western, which I learned later is essentially the point. But as someone who's never heard of it, didn't appreciate its intention, and frankly didn't do any research for like the history of Westerns at the point of 1971, because Clint is still making spaghetti Westerns at this point. So if anybody's going to watch it, like Kyle brought up at the beginning, this is not a showdown Western, even though there is a showdown in it. And this is not an anti-hero Western, even though there's an anti-hero in it, because this is a trope-breaking film.
Right.
So only after speaking with you and our special guests, Jason, James,
Jordan. Johnny, Jamathan. Yeah, it's Jamathan.
Jamathan Blake.
Jordan Drake, by the way, is the real person's name. We should put that out front.
Much more qualified. And all jokes aside, learning about the history, context, and intent of the film made this movie much more important for me too. And my rating actually went up. Imagine that. When I left, I was kind of like, I don't know. And then after talking to you nerds, I was like, oh yeah, I see all of that. It's very good.
I mean, everyone's definition of fun is probably going to be a little bit different. Also, as a little caveat to this, I did know a lot of the history to the making of this movie before I watched it. Had never seen it before. And of course, I ended up really enjoying watching it. I don't think it is a 100% like home run, knock it out of the park. Like, it is not, at least as of yet, after only one viewing, gone up to be like, this is like in my top 100 or top 50 movies of all time. But there are a lot of things I appreciate about it. Robert Altman knows how to like frame actors. I do love his thing about people overlapping dialogue, which a lot of people don't like, but I do. It lends this feeling of realism to the movies. But I think what is the biggest driver of this movie, because it's not the plot. The plot really isn't what's driving this movie. It's the central performances of McCabe, played by Warren Beatty, Mrs Miller, played by Julie Christie, and how those two people kind of come together within this film. And I think it's a beautiful kind of love story, but also like just the magnetism of those two actors on display was something I just kept coming back for. We have this very long conversation about how interesting Warren Beatty is just as a person, as an actor, but there is something undeniable. I can't stop looking at this guy, and not just because of beauty, but because like there's just something, there's some actors who are able to command the screen, and he is one of those people. Like the performances, like the showdown, like how it kind of goes against a lot of the tropes of the Western genre. And so I ended up really enjoying it on a philosophical level and on an emotional level too by the very, very end as well. So I don't know, I was a big fan of it overall.
Just to be more specific, because we spoil everything, the tropes. So we have a guy, one of the best, dirtiest fur coats of all time, showing up in this developing shithole with a bunch of no good nicks. That's a technical term. And we have an evolution of a gambler opening up a flop house, meeting a tough Cockney whore.
Wow.
Yeah. And they're gonna live the American dream. It's the weirdest thing. And so it's not, Josie Wales entering a place to save a town from itself.
That is kind of one of the things that I kind of loved about this movie. What this movie is about, kept changing for me. So I was like, oh, this is what it is. And like, oh wait, no, this is what it's about. It is. So I never really knew where it was going, and that was enough to like sustain me for the full 2 hours.
Yeah, and me being a childish plebe, I was confused by that because I had expectations of what was going in. So if you watch this film, understand that you are not in for a Hollywood or spaghetti Western. That is not, this is a drama, and it plays into it by form, but not function. Can we say it that way? And, there is a shootout, and it's actually excellently well shot, but is not what you think it's going to be. It is, it's funny.
Yeah.
The more we talked about it in our full episode, you guys would say something, I'd be like, oh yeah, that's 100% true. So all of the tropes of Western are in there, but they're not fun intentionally.
Right.
But they're fun once you understand the context. So
I think the biggest thing that we also discover is the fact that no matter what kind of movie you are, shooting in the snow must be the worst thing in the world to actually do.
Yeah.
It looks absolutely miserable in this movie when they're in the snow.
And as we learned, Jordan explains to us that was not supposed to happen, and they ran with it because the director was like, fuck it, this is what we need to use. And those scenes, as brutal as they were for them, kind of make the movie. The conclusion, the last shot of it, I mean, that's where this whole movie actually makes sense for me. I was gritting my teeth a bit.
Just like Clint Eastwood, you were squinting your eyes and biting your teeth.
And conclusion, fascinating, well shot. I think the town fire thing's awkward. They talk about a metaphor. I see it after. I don't know if it's in there when I watched the first time. But watching Warren Beatty, can we spoil it?
Sure.
Die in the snow. That is shot so romantically and so brutally. I loved it. Yeah, that part's great. The numbers keep going up every time we talk about it. Good movie.
I think that there might have to be a reckoning on the final episode of this season, and maybe we'll need to bump up some and drop down some on further reflection the further we get away from some of these movies. We would love you to join the conversation this Friday as we discuss McCabe and Mrs Miller in greater detail. Available anywhere you get podcasts. Just remember to bring your own fur coat.
Like, it's got to be. You have to have stitched it yourself.
Gigantic. If you haven't killed at least 100 chinchillas, you're doing it wrong.
I had a friend who had pet chinchillas. It was kind of weird because they were just stuck in this cage and they're actually really cute. They kind of look like Pikachus. They're bigger than you think. Of course, if you're going to make a fur coat, you can't do it.
They're like 90% hair,
And apparently Cal's not afraid of them, but he's afraid of a mouse.
No, I am.
They're more like weird-looking, slothy bunnies.
Yeah, and they like roll around in the volcanic ash. Otherwise, their fur will get super matted, so they have to roll around in the dust, and they're cute.
You know a lot about chinchillas.
In grade 7, I had a teacher that had a zoo license, so we actually got to like raise certain animals. Yes, I know a lot about animals because I took that class.
You raised a chinchilla in Rocky Mountain House?
One of them. I was more into like the birds and the snakes and stuff like that.
Yeah, I would have picked you as a snake guy.
Didn't feed the snakes. This is not going to be in the video, but hilariously, I remember my science teacher, because they had to raise mice to feed the snakes. And so literally, he took a mouse one day, he's like breaks its neck, right, and hands it to me. So I like take it by the tail, and I'm like freaking out. And I'm like, what do I do? What do I do? Ugh, so one of the worst days of my entire life, holding this thing by the tail. I'm like, it's moving.
Awesome.
That's where the terror began.
Quick note, Roger Ebert made an allusion for ampersands. What a nerd.
I know. Whatever. Definitely watch the video, which will probably be like a recommended video on this one, of Pauline Kael like giving an impassioned defense of this movie on the Dick Cavett show.
She fangirls so hard. It's actually kind of cute.
And I think a few of the other critics who were quite good simply didn't get with the picture. I think they somewhat misinterpreted it.
And comment. We've been getting a lot of comments, so keep it up.
Comment even if you hate it.
Do you have anything to eat? I'm bloody starving. I'm hungry enough I could eat a bloody horse.
Well, at Sheehan's place, you probably will.
Not the frontier wit, I see.
Birds and clouds and rocks and stuff and small town western people
walking through the shit of human feces.